35 pounds, 5'7", full of bravado. So we got a war coming up, dog. We didn't know what we were talking about, but my whole class, as a body, just about went into the service from my hometown. Now, if you are interested in statistics, my hometown in Pennsylvania had about 5,000 people. Of that 5,000 people, 2,500 of them were in World War II. That's the Army, Navy, Marines, Nurse Corps, Coast Guard service, whatever. So you get into the scheme of things. We all thought, well, we got to sign up for the draft. So we go ahead and I happened to move from my hometown down to a larger place, about 5,000 people, down to Philadelphia. There's a few more people there than my town. And I signed up for the draft, and while I was there, I got a chance to go to work at Fleetwing Aircraft, building the vertical stabilizers for what was then called an A-10 bomber. And it was a precursor to some of the B-24s and B-17s that you all are familiar with. And in fact, I don't think it even had a name yet. I worked at that for about a year, and our whole group decided that we were tired of working 12 hours a day. We thought maybe we'd go into service and get a little bit of a break. We went from 12 hours a day to 20 hours a day, and we all migrated down to the physical in 2nd Street in Philadelphia. And it was a room about the size of this church. And if you can imagine, over 1,000 human beings, all male, with no clothes on, walking in this great big circle, it's kind of comical. But anyway, we went through this physical, and everybody seemed like if you didn't have a wooden leg and a spear sticking in your shoulder, you passed the physical, because they needed people in a hurry. And we got up to the end of the line, and they said, "Okay, guys, put your clothes on, and if you can find them, and we're going to swear you in." So we get dressed and go over there, and we said, "Well, what are we swearing into?" And we got to put half a dozen choices now. You go in the Army, you go in the Navy, you go in the Marine Corps, you go in the Coast Guard, whatever. And all of the fellows that I went down to sign up with, they all wanted to go into the Marine Corps. And I said, "No, guys, I'm going into the Navy." And they put a lot of pressure on me, but I held on, and I'm the only one that came back from World War II from that group. They all went to the Philippines, and God rest their souls, they're still there, but they're still brothers in arms. I got into the Navy. I went up and I took a course as a fire controlman. And everybody says, "Oh, you're going to be down the engineer room." No, you're going to fire the main battery of the ship. We had 6-inch rifles on board ship. I was in the USS Omaha, 4-stack cruiser. It was born the same year as I was. And in other words, it was an old buggy. But it could do 32 knots. And that's something to be said for a ship that size. If you stood the ship up next to the Washington Monument, it was exactly the same size as in height. So it's 555 feet long. We had what we called a 50 caliber machine gun, and some of you guys can you can get into one of those things and have a good time with it. But when a guy my size got into it, my toes just barely touched the deck when I got that thing into a position where I could fire it. And that was only one of our duties. We had main battery duties. We had aircraft alert. And when you're over in the Mediterranean area where I was, we were in what they called the 6th Fleet. The 5th Fleet was in the Pacific. And we had to go on air alert every night, 30 minutes before the sun went down and 30 minutes before the sun came up. The only problem was, in the Mediterranean, the sun was always up. So we wound up being on duty when you weren't in the if you weren't in actual combat with a short patrol or something like that. I mean a fortress or if you weren't involved in a general alert, let me put it that way, you had to be pretty much ready to go from this job to that job to another job, and when you ran out of ammunition, they'd run the ship back down to New Jersey. And stand up for just a moment, please.
Yeah, Mr. Wignall, stand up.
You guys, he's a big guy. Okay, thank you. I wasn't much bigger than that. And our shells on the rifle was a shell about this long, about this big around, and it weighed 105 pounds. We had to go off the ship to a loading dock, pick up one of these shells, put it on our shoulders, climb 60 feet up a Jacob's ladder, across the weather deck, and down to the storekeepers and turn over that shell, and they stored it below the ship. And after you do that about 12 times, you're ready to go to sleep, believe me. Those are the fun times. During the war, they had communications from all kinds of media, and the Army had one way of notifying your parents if there's something happened to you, and we have a radio announcer by the name of Axis Sally, and her counterpart was Tokyo Rose, and these were people that peddled propaganda, and they made the announcement that my ship was sunk. And of course I'm checking it out because I was sitting there writing a letter and I didn't feel any water. At the same time, my older brother, two older brothers, one got hit by a piece of shrapnel on the back. The other one was shot twice from it was in a foxhole by a sniper. So all these people sent out telegrams out. My mother got all of them at the same time. And her hair turned from pure black to pure white overnight. And of course, we thought it was a real funny, big joke. But when you have a family that's got 5 brothers, all of them in the service, it gets a little hairy sometimes. But the Navy service was good to us. We had three sessions of actual combat. In the invasion of Sicily, we were on the D-Day H hour. You're all familiar with that. Eisenhower and his group had the various beaches up along the French line, and a lot of people don't even know it, but at the same time, at the same hour, at the same second, the General Patton and General Omar Bradley were landing in the island of Sicily, and on the west side of a little town called Gila. And at the same time on the east coast was General Mark Clark and General Lucian, I'm sorry, I mispronounced his name, but General Lucian, and they went up to the east side of Sicily, and we exchanged fire with the shore troops. And what happened was the Germans were pretty cagey. They built up fortifications that made them look like houses, and the chimney was sticking up over the top of these little fortifications. And when they thought nobody was paying attention, the door would slide open, that thing would come down, and they'd start shooting at you. You're sitting offshore about 3,000 yards. That's pretty hairy. And if you happen to be on a rangefinder duty on board ship, you happen to be aiming in on one of those things, your rangefinder was about not quite as wide as this room, but about 12 feet on each side of center. And you get that great big red flash out there, and it makes you wonder how they're going to miss. But for some reason or another, we never took a hit. The same thing happened on the invasion at southern France. And after the troops got so far ahead, the Germans had retreated to the point where our troops were at the area where our bombardment was supposed to be landing. So they called out that off real fast, and they sent us on across. They sent us through a minefield of all things, and that gets pretty hairy. And going through the minefield, the English were very brave soldiers, in spite of what people might think. Especially these guys that rowed these little tiny boats. If you can imagine, if you took a quart jar, filled it half full of water, and just shook the heck out of it, what's happening going on in that thing? When all our troops had landed on D-Day H hour, the Atlantic Ocean and the Mediterranean were very rough seas at that time because of the weather patterns. If you're familiar with Cape Hatteras, you got warm water meeting cold water, everything boils over. The spray was coming up over the front of the ship, 63 feet off the level of water. The waves were coming over the top of it. And we're trying to land these boys on these LCIs, landing craft infantry. And their ships were things were doing this number, and their stomachs were doing this number, if you can imagine. And we were having a little trouble. We had a duty station in a tripod on the front of the ship that was about 100 feet above the sea level. And if you move that thing just 1 inch on the level of the water, when you get up on the top of that thing, it was going over here and going over here. At the same time, the ship was doing this, going back and forth, back and forth. And pitch and roll, the whole pile. So we couldn't even get a name on the shore batteries where we were bombarding. So we started counting. We had one fella that went counting from the time we hit the top of that roll. He counted backwards, and the other one was waiting. And when we hit the bottom, he was counting the other way. And as soon as those two numbers came together, we gave the word to the chief of the boat, and he would pull the trigger and fire the weapons. We managed to hit all our targets under those conditions. Everything wasn't serious in the Navy. There's a lot of things that went on. We had one young fella. I won't say he was incompetent, but he just didn't think fast. And every Saturday morning we had an inspection on board ship, and you had to be dressed up in your whites. And he had all his whites in the laundry at the same time, which was kind of dumb. But anyway, we had a big laundry bag, probably as high as these flag stands here, and you put all your laundry in there, and each division on board ship had their own bag. Well, he happened to be in the same group that I was in, and he didn't know what to do because he wasn't going to be dressed. All he had was his skivvies to show up for inspection. So he takes that laundry bag and tips it over and crawls into it and manages to get it stood up. And he's waiting in there for this inspection to go by, and the captain's going by with all the master-at-arms and everybody else taking names if your hair was long like mine. All this fun things that go on. But then the guy falls asleep. He's sleeping.
In the laundry bag.
Inside of this laundry bag, and the skipper's coming by, and the bosun's mate's back there writing down who got comments from the skipper. The poor guy's dreaming that he's swimming or something because he tips over. And the laundry bag and all lands right at the foot of the captain's feet.
No, not the captain.
He got up, what happened? And I imagine that he thought about that for a long time after we got out of there. But that was one of the fun times on board ship. Okay, you'll notice I've got a couple of different patches back there. After I served my time in the Navy, 1942 to 46, I got discharged, and how many of you know what a ruptured duck is? A ruptured duck. It was a little triangular shaped patch. If you served honorably and didn't get into any kind of trouble, saying like thinking you were a macho man and tipping the bottle up or something like that, if you served your time and got an honorable discharge, they sewed that on your blouse of your uniform, and only people who got that thing were the ones that got honorable discharges from the service at the end of World War II. And you'll see, maybe you'll see some old timers, probably not many of us, because we're disappearing about 1,000 a month. So that's old guys my age. I'm older than him. That's a very distinguished thing to get. And what it is, I don't know if there's one on my jacket there or not. No, I don't have it on there.
Not on this one.
Wait a minute, yes it is. Over on this side, right here.
Oh, there it is, yeah.
That's a ruptured duck. And this thing was in if you can imagine, a triangle all the way around that thing, and you wore it with pride. And this is something that you have to look forward to if you're planning a military career. You want to try and keep yourself as physically fit as you can. They're talking about hearing. I hear cicadas in my ear all the time, because on our 3-inch anti-aircraft guns, they used to fire those things about 4 feet away from your other duty station. And you had this blam, blam, blam going against you all the time. So that's one of my souvenirs from World War II. I got out of the Navy, and I got a job up in Erie, Pennsylvania. And I was working 8 hours a day, and I had nothing to do after that. I went to the boss and I said, can I work a couple extra hours every day? He said, I'm not going to pay you any extra money to work. I said, I'll work for my regular pay, I don't care. So he says, what's your problem? And I told him, I said, I'm going crazy out here. So he let me do it for a little while, and then he cut me off. So it was getting about like outside now, you know, the weather was turning. And around the corner from where I lived was a bar. And I went down there, and I walked in there, and I couldn't, no, I'm what, heck, I can't even count anymore. I know when I went into service, I was about 17. When I came out 4 years later, I was 40. So, not having a thing to do, I go in this bar, and I order a drink, and the guy says, what do you want? And I said, I don't know, give me something of those. He puts a bottle of Southern Comfort on the bar, and like an idiot, I'm throwing these down and blah, blah, blah with everybody around. And it's about 8 o'clock in the evening, and it's a Friday night, and the next thing I knew, it was coming on about 10 o'clock Saturday, and I found myself sitting on the doorstep of my place. And I said, where have I been? Like I thought I was in a bar. I was stone cold drunk. And you think it's cold here. Pennsylvania has 2 seasons up there where I live. They have a winter and a 4th of July. So that gave me a clue. From that time on, the closest I came to Southern comfort was a can of Coca-Cola. And just keep that in your mind, because that can happen to you. The worst thing that can happen is that you have a duty of guiding the main battery on a light cruiser. And if you're having a hangover, your hands are doing this, what they call them, DTs. And you can't do a thing right. And I learned that lesson pretty well. When I got out of the service, and all this stuff happened to me, I noticed that when I was walking around, I wore a size 9 shoe, 28 waist in my trousers, and probably 30 in my jacket, and 135 pounds, and that was about 90% of the people on board this ship. We had a few of the officers that were older, and they had to rely on us to take care of all these maneuvers. Even under today's circumstances, you know, the nuclear submarines are out, and they're being named after. They used to be named after fish, and they changed that now. If decommissioned to Omaha, they're going to be on the 3rd or 4th Omaha now, and they're going to be guided missile ships. Okay, this led me to a decision. What am I going to do with my life? And when I realized everything that was happening to me, I thought the best thing for me to do would be to go down and re-enlist. And when I went into the recruiting office, they told me that I had to enlist for 6 years, but I had to start over as a seaman. And I said, no, it took me 4 years to get a petty officer rating, and if I'm going to start over, I'm going to go in the Army. Well, as a consequence, I wound up with 2 tours in Korea. And the first tour was during the shooting war, and Syngman Rhee turned all the prisoners loose behind us that were imprisoned, the North Korean soldiers that were imprisoned. Turned them loose because they were his brothers. His brothers immediately set out in groups, setting fire to military reservations. They burned the town of Tucson down, Pusan. It's got a new name now. I think it's called Fusan.
Yeah, there's Busan and Pusan.
It keeps changed, but they had the Pusan perimeter, and that's where we started into the war. But anyway, they burned the whole city down. And the second time we went over there, we were still under armistice. Technically, we were at war, but there was no shooting going on because we were locked up in a valley. And the weapons we had, nobody wanted to admit they were there. And that was the second part. The last part of my tour in the Army, the first 4 days of Vietnam. And I was on orders to go to Vietnam. I was a master sergeant. I was on orders to go to Vietnam as to give them instructions on supply problems, which was completely foreign to my training. So I had a choice of going over there as a master sergeant, because what was happening, the kids were rolling hand grenades across the deck and running like crazy. blowing them up as fast as they got there, which is a bad thing about that. So my new philosophy now is the government should wait for people that are in their 50s and 55, 60, cut down on the extraneous things that they got you doing for boot camp and this sort of thing. Keep you young fellas where you are for a while, give you a lot of experience, and let this old timers take care of the job, because we know enough to keep our head down. A little kid asked me, did I ever get a Purple Heart? And I told him that was very, very nice thing, but that's not what you look for.
You have to keep your head down, right?
Keep your head down all the time.
Head down.
Anyway, I could go on and on, but I think you all had enough of old timers here.
No, we want to thank you. And because you were in Vietnam, I wanted to thank you specifically, because a lot of the people who went to Vietnam never got that thank you.
And
So thank you very much for serving.
And the nicest thing you can do, if you know somebody that served in Vietnam, especially in the Marine Corps, the best words you can give them is welcome home.
And welcome home.
Welcome home.
In continuation, we also would like to give you these two pins in commemoration of the 50th anniversary of the Vietnam War.
Thank you very much.
And so this is also from the Daughters of the American Revolution. So
Oh,
this is the
thank
source
you very
of
much.
this.
I appreciate that.
Thank you for your service, sir.
Thank you.
And it was